In previous videos, I've mentioned, probably repeatedly, my early days mentor, Bill Wagman, known by all as Pony Bill because he had had a thriving business of selling ponies for more than they were worth when people would pay more than they were worth. And he was stuck with that name throughout his career. In fact, I can remember him chuckling when he got a letter in the mail. It was simply addressed to Pony Bill, Red Lion, PA. It found its way right to his door. Bill was also a man who had a real eye for a horse, and he had judging cards in a number of associations, was a popular and busy horse show judge. And he would come back from shows often with a story to tell. So here are a couple of stories and a couple of ways Bill would deal with issues that might come up in the course of his judging activities. And some of them were decidedly non-standard. One was, it's not unheard of for somebody to try to buy off a judge. And in the late 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of people trying to put a certain number of points on their horse to complete an AQHA championship. And sometimes the final points were hard to come by. They might have been halter points on a performance horse or performance points on a halter horse, and it wasn't their real main skill set. So if you could influence a judge, there were those who would do it, and there were those who would pay to influence a judge. And I asked Bill one time, I said, you hear all about politics in judging. You ever get offered money? You ever get offered bribes? He says, yeah, I do, from time to time, although it's less these days. And I said, well, what do you do about it? He said, oh, I've got a way of dealing with it. He said, I take the money, then I place the horse last. They get the message. And in his view, the right winners won and the right losers lost. He got to pocket some money, and the guy who was trying to be crooked ended up at the bottom of the heap. And they didn't tend to try it again with Pony Bill. He also showed horses, and he would think about ways to influence judges when he competed. And he had a real nice gray gelding, attractive horse, basically a halter horse, could barely get out of his own way. So one day he says, I'm gonna take Ghost over to Craig Coleflesh's, and he's gonna put sliding plates on him. I said, Bill, why are you taking him to get slide plates on? I mean, he can't stop, he can't turn around. He said, well, I need him for the horse show. So here was what Bill had figured out. He knew that the Harrisburg show, that then the breed show at the Keystone International Livestock Exposition, often sprang for out-of-state judges with pretty high profiles. And on this occasion, the judge was going to be Clyde Kennedy from California, who showed all kinds of horses but had a particular love for cow horses and reining horses. So Bill went and got slide plates on this big gray gelding. And he gets him in the halter class, and there are some better halter horses in the class. So Bill's standing about fourth, and Clyde Kennedy's walking around the horses, and when he tracks them out, he walks over to Bill, and I see him talking, and I later learned he said, well, you got slide plates on this horse. And Bill, of course, said, yeah, we got to get his halter points, then we're going to take him back to the reining. Well, Clyde was in love, and he moved him from fourth place to second, and he ended up going reserve for the horse show. All because Clyde liked reining horses, and this horse was wearing slide plates. Nobody else would have thought about that, but Bill damn sure did. Another example of judging came up when Bill was at a big Appaloosa show. And at that time, the native costume classes were quite the thing. And these folks would I mean, they'd put on war paint and feathers and, you know, jaw ropes on these horses, some of which were pretty cold jawed anyway, and they'd get on them bareback and they'd carry lances and they'd go through all sorts of routines sometimes. So he was up at a show in New York, and he was going to judge the native costume class in the evening because it was a very popular spectator class. So he's watching these two guys come in, because you could have a partner if you had a routine. So these two guys in full native dress, and they were going to run this elaborate pattern. And Bill's challenge was to figure out where in the hell to stand in the arena, because at that time it was pretty unusual for judges to judge from outside the arena itself. You were down on ground zero. So Bill thought, well, the one place they probably won't come is right in the dead center of the pen. Well, unbeknownst to him, as they were galloping around and pulling on these jaw ropes, and the horses were kind of running a little bit sideways, that their plan was to cross in the center. Bill's standing in the center. These horses are going everywhere. He doesn't know where to run, so he stands fast. They come back on line, and they hit him, and he flies straight up in the air. And Bill was an older guy, but he was pretty catty. And he twisted around, and he managed to land on his feet. And then, being Bill, he took a bow. Well, that was apparently a popular routine, because it was going to be repeated in the championship round the next night. And Bill was sitting at the diner that next morning getting his morning breakfast, and he hears two guys talking about the horse show, and the one guy says, well, you got to come back for the evening performance tonight for the championship in the native costume, but I know who's going to win. He said, there's these couple of guys, they go racing around there. They got two horses in the ring, and they even got the judge in it. He does one hell of a stunt. You got to watch this. I can tell you that the stunt was not repeated the second night, but it was appreciated on the first. So those are a couple stories. Let me see what else I got in my drawer here. Maybe I got another one I wrote down that I can remember. Let's see. Yeah, here's an example of choosing your judges when you go to a horse show, because Bill was back showing a horse. And he had two choices. He could go to a show in New York, or he could go to a show in Ohio. And he says, I don't know which one to go to. They're just about the same distance. He said, the guy in New York is dumb as can be. Doesn't really know what he's looking at. But the guy in Ohio is a crook. So I saw Bill on Monday. I said, where did you wind up going? He says, oh, I went to Ohio. And I said, Bill, you told me the guy in Ohio was crooked. He said, yeah, but I got to thinking. If that guy woke up that morning and decided to play it straight, he could. That dumb guy, he was going to be dumb forever. So I went with the crooked guy. And as fate would have it, he did rather well at the horse show. So those are some stories about the older days, when horse shows maybe weren't quite as formalized, and maybe there's still things that go on behind the scenes that I don't see, but it gives you a little insight into the underbelly, let's say, of horse competition. It also gave me a chance to tell a story, which I never like to miss. So hope you enjoyed it. If you've got similar stories, post them up in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Thank you.